Hello, I'm Tom Harris, professor in economics and director, University Center for Economic Development. This is the second in a series Fred's discussing, and this is going to be about general improvement districts. Another, like I said, as economists, we do, here's the numbers, here are the trends. But then some people say, okay, that's good. What can I do next? And this is where Fred, with his public administration experience, can add what tools to make economic development get it off the ground. And one of them is the general improvement or GID district. So Fred.
Well, thank you, Tom. As Tom mentioned, my name is Fred Steinmann. I'm an assistant research professor here in the College of Business at the University of Nevada, Reno, and I currently work with Tom at the University Center for Economic Development. And it's a pleasure to talk with you and talk with everyone who's watching about the General Improvement District, or Nevada Revised Statute, Chapter 318. So hopefully you're seeing my screen in the title slide for this. As Tom mentioned, this is part of a series of podcasts really focusing on elements of state law that allows municipal governments and county governments within the state of Nevada to localize the cost of providing public infrastructure, public services, and even public facilities to support new economic development and new projects and development that is initially and really fully launched by the private sector moving forward. And in this particular podcast, I'm going to be focused on the General Improvement District, or GID, as defined in Nevada Revised Statute, Chapter 318. Now, this is obviously a lot of words and a pretty noisy slide, but this is taken right out of the statute. Again, from NRS Chapter 318. Section 015, subsection 1. The authorizing legislation and the subsequent state law outlined the purpose of the General Improvement District, and that's primarily to essentially serve a public use that will promote the health, safety, prosperity, security, and general welfare of the inhabitants thereof and of the state of Nevada. And then, of course, the statute goes on to lists the various powers and appropriate uses of the General Improvement District authorizing statute. As I'll talk about in this particular podcast, it's important to note that the General Improvement District is, in all regards, treated as an ad valorem property tax. So in the state of Nevada, per the state constitution, there is a cap on the maximum property tax rate that any city or county can essentially utilize and impose upon property located within their jurisdiction. And the General Improvement District, because it is treated as an ad valorem property tax, is subsequent to that tax cap. And that's made the utilization of the General Improvement District a little less popular in, say, the last decade than in previous decades, where counties and cities were really utilizing the General Improvement District as a way to, again, localize the cost of new public infrastructure, services, and facilities to the localized impact area or geographic scope of new development. It's also become a less or somewhat out of fashion way to protect the general fund because you have to get your General Improvement District tax rate underneath the state mandated property tax cap. You are essentially taking away potential revenue from your general fund as a municipality or county that would have been generated from just kind of regular old property tax revenue sources. But we still see its utilization. And as opposed to things like redevelopment districts, tourism improvement districts, tax increment areas, or special assessment districts, all of which are very popular uses by more urban, populated, metropolitan areas in the state, we've really seen the General Improvement District come into its own and used widely in the non-metro portions and communities of the state of Nevada. So those communities really kind of outside the Reno-Sparks metro area, the Carson City metro area, and the Las Vegas metro area, or outside Washoe, Carson City, and Clark counties. And that primarily has to do that the property tax rates in those, again, less populated, more rural, less metro communities and counties, their property tax rates are pretty low to begin with. So they have a lot of extra room, if you will, to fit in a GID underneath that particular cap. And to a certain degree, they are also utilized in our more urban areas, but probably to a lesser degree than the other financing tools. This kind of just gives you a quick overview of kind of the use scope of general improvement districts throughout the state. This was, of course, post-Great Recession in fiscal years 2012 and 2013. As of 2013, there were 84 general improvement districts in operation throughout the state, the majority in Douglas County, then kind of Humboldt County, then Lyon County, and then kind of everybody else with a semi-equal share of its utilization. But even kind of brought up to the more contemporary or modern era here in fiscal year 2020, 2021, general improvement districts are really a tool utilized more so by our rural non-metro communities throughout the state. And again, that has to do with the impact that the state constitutionally mandated property tax cap has. In our more urban populated areas like Washoe County, Carson City, and Clark County, those jurisdictions are already kind of maxed out at their property tax cap. So there's less flexibility to utilize the general improvement district authorizing statutes than the other tools like special assessment districts or redevelopment districts, which we'll cover in another separate podcast. But you can see that as a revenue stream, fairly sizable amounts of revenue from these general improvement districts have been generated over the years. And then, of course, counties and cities, primarily in the rural non-metro areas, have used them to finance a variety of public infrastructure projects, new facilities like community centers, fire stations, new police stations, improvements to courthouses, and new programs, conservation programs, even supplementing weed control districts and insect control districts that are authorized and created under other authorizing legislation within the NRS. Again, kind of like special assessment districts, general improvement districts, a little less in vogue, but municipalities and counties, even in our larger metro urban populated areas, are starting to reconsider the utilization of general improvement districts along with everything else. Largely because of the impact that recessions and economic downturns have had on the general fund revenues of municipalities and counties throughout the state. This chart right here just shows the behavior of all the property tax revenue collected by every single county in the state of Nevada combined, including Carson City, from fiscal year 2007-8 all the way to the last current full fiscal year at the time of recording of this podcast, fiscal year 2019-20. And you can see the impact that an economic downturn has on property tax revenue very, very quickly. The Great Recession was from late 2008 into 2010. So those two fiscal year periods, you really see how property tax revenue declined as a result of the Great Recession and how long it has taken for property tax revenue to recover. In fact, if you go to the last full fiscal year 2019-20, property tax revenue combined for all counties in the state of Nevada has yet to recover fully to the high water mark back in fiscal year 2008 and 2009. And that largely has to do with the interesting elements of Nevada's fiscal system and how the property tax works in Nevada. a topic that is far too lengthy and complicated to get into in a relatively short podcast like this. But the big takeaway from this is municipalities and counties, especially in the economic recovery from the Great Recession, saw that their property tax revenue was stalling out in terms of its recovery. But this was a period of massive economic growth and population growth in the state of Nevada. As population grew, there was demand for additional housing and additional commercial retail services, and even new manufacturing and industrial centers, and even improvements made to our tourism and hospitality industry. And while those industries and private property owners certainly are producing new property tax revenue and new sales tax revenue, it wasn't enough to offset the declines in other areas. But that new development was demanding services, right? You need roads, you need sewer, you need water, power, you need sidewalks, curbs, gutters, streetscaping. You need additional police and fire protection services. You may need new community centers and educational facilities, new parks to service a growing population. And because the recovery to property tax revenue was sticky, essentially one of two primary revenue streams for local cities and counties, cities and counties have looked to these other financing tools allowed under the Nevada revised statutes and state law, like special assessment districts and tax increment areas, or in this case, the general improvement district, as a way of financing the cost of that new infrastructure, those new services, and those new facilities that was a result of the population growth and the economic growth that we saw in the post-Great Recession era here in the state of Nevada. And of course, over the last year, the state and our counties and our cities have been hit particularly hard in terms of their revenue streams as a result of the ongoing COVID-19 global pandemic. And that is why things like general improvement districts have kind of reemerged as an area of consideration for local governments throughout the state. You see a very similar trend when we look at the other of two primary revenue streams for local governments in Nevada, and that's the sales and the use tax. Now, unlike the property tax, the sales and the use tax recovered much, much faster than the property tax revenue from the Great Recession. But still, from the high watermark of fiscal year 07-08 in terms of total sales and use taxes collected by all counties in the state of Nevada, it took till fiscal year 2013-14 for it to reach kind of that pre-Great Recession level. And you can see the last two fiscal years, from fiscal year 18-19 into fiscal year 19-20, which includes the first 6 months of 2020. That's March, April, May, June, you know, those months where we were dealing with business closures, lockdowns, stay-at-home orders in the early months of the global COVID-19 pandemic. And you saw an immediate decline in sales tax revenue. But at the same time, as population continues to grow, as new housing development occurs, as new commercial retail development is now getting back underway, and as we continue to diversify the state's economy with investments in new warehousing, manufacturing, advanced manufacturing centers, we still have to pay the cost of the infrastructure and the public facilities and the public services needed to support that development. So that development can serve public interests, creation of new jobs, raising of incomes, all the things that we're trying to do in response to the economic impacts of COVID-19. So again, with property tax revenue being depressed coming out of the Great Recession, and sales tax revenue even remaining fairly depressed for a number of years in the post-Great Recession area, local governments have turned to things like the General Improvement District as outlined in Nevada Revised Statute Chapter 318 as a way of financing and supporting and formalizing the public-private partnership that is a hallmark, a benchmark of community and economic development in Nevada. Creation and use of the establishment of a general improvement district is pretty straightforward, and all the authorizing procedural steps, if you will, required to establish and use a GID is found under, again, Chapter 318 of the Nevada Revised Statute, but specifically in Section 055. And like everything else, it begins with the local public elected body. For a municipality, that's the city council. For a county, that's the board of county commissioners. Essentially authorizing staff to study the feasibility of forming a general improvement district. That typically begins with the designation of a study area. And it's important to note that a general improvement district is geographically located. You can't just say, we're going to establish a GID and collect revenue. No, you have to be extremely specific on the geographic scope of the GID, because only property owners within that established general improvement district, the geographic area that will house the GID, only those property owners will pay the additional property tax levy to support the GID moving forward. And then again, that's the process by which we localize costs and revenues to support infrastructure, facilities, and services that are going to benefit only really those property owners within the established GID. A GID can also be started by a petition of property owners within a defined study area. So if I'm a developer and I own 20 acres of land, as the only property owner, I could petition the city council or the county commission to look at establishing a GID in my new development to support the infrastructure and pay for the infrastructure and the services and the facilities necessary to support the development post-completion, right? We joke in the world of public finance and public administration that any fool can build a road from point A to point B. That's an exact cost. If I'm going to build a mile of road from point A to point B, I can estimate with 100% certainty how much it's going to cost to build that road. What's a little trickier is thinking about how do I maintain that road for all time? I don't have to worry about maintenance just in year 1 or year 5, but I need to think about year 10, year 20, year 50, potentially year 100 from the building of that road. And I need to make sure that there is a revenue stream, all of the, general improvement district or other tool that is going to be there to generate the revenue needed to maintain the road and the other infrastructure over the lifetime of that road. And again, given the quirkiness of Nevada's fiscal system, it's a very dangerous proposition for cities and counties to rely primarily on their general fund revenues as a way to finance the maintenance of that specific stretch of road from point A to point B. It makes sense administratively, practically, efficiently, effectively to establish something like a GID to do that. And that's why a lot of developers, at the beginning of their project, will actually petition the city council or county commission to establish a GID to fund that infrastructure in perpetuity. Because for the developer, that's a marketing tool, right? I get to say, hey, you're buying into a community that has a dedicated revenue source to maintain infrastructure and services that you as a property owner in this new development are going to utilize for the length of your property ownership within the GID itself. The second step, once it's been studied, is really just formal adoption. Once the formation documents have been prepared, the relating, GIS and map work is done, once the fiscal and economic feasibility study is done, then it's time for the city council or the county commission, whoever is the responsible elected body, to essentially adopt a resolution or petition by initiating an ordinance. And again, the specific steps and what are required in that ordinance and resolution are all outlined in Nevada Revised Statute, Chapter 318, Section 055. And of course, you can get that online through the state government's website directly. Again, some other key elements. Probably, really important again is the second bullet point here, that you really do have to provide that description of the proposed general improvement district's boundaries. or the geographic territory that the GID will essentially cover. And that allows property owners to determine whether her or his property is within the district and whether or not they're going to be paying that additional ad valorem property tax levy in addition to the base rate, right? You know, that we all pay, and that is apportioned to cities, counties, school districts, and the state as a whole. That additional levy, the GID levy rate, is going to be collected specifically by the GID and can only be used specifically to support the infrastructure, the services, or the facilities that is permissible within the GID's initiating documents. And again, that provides the certainty in terms of the geographic boundaries for property owners to understand, either existing property owners or new property owners moving into the district itself. Unlike other financing tools, you know, tax increment areas, tourism improvement districts, redevelopment agency districts, or special assessment districts, GIDs are pretty narrow or pretty limited in what they can finance in terms of that additional property tax levy within the specific boundaries of the general improvement district. Although once you read this list of 21 authorized powers and activities found within NRS Chapter 318, that's a pretty extensive list in terms of what you can finance. One important difference, however, between the general improvement district and all the other financing tools authorized under state law is that most general improvement districts now are single purpose districts. There are a couple. There's the Incline Village General Improvement District located in Washoe County in Incline Village that is multi-purpose. But that is becoming less and less frequent, only because over the last several legislative sessions, say over the last 2 decades, the legislature has really restricted what new general improvement districts can do. So now most general improvement districts are single-use districts. So if I'm considering establishing a new general improvement district, I can only pick one out of these 21 authorized powers and activities that general improvement district is going to be able to finance, as opposed to an SAD or a redevelopment district or a tax increment area that can finance really more than just one thing, an infinite list to a certain degree of things that those other districts can and financing tools can finance. GIDs really are single purpose. That said, and again, this is the creativity of local government at its best, you can overlap multiple general improvement districts. So I can take an existing GID and within that defined geographic area, I can have multiple GIDs linked over and overlaid upon that. And each one of those unique general improvement districts can finance one of these 21 authorized powers and activities. That's why in a county like Douglas County, there are about 20 active general improvement districts. And a lot of them are just overlaid GIDs, one focusing on financing electrical, light, and power infrastructure improvements, and another one focusing on, say, furnishing of sidewalks, and another one laid on top of that, which is financing storm drainage or flood control. Now, it's important to note, however, that you are still limited by the constitutionally imposed property tax cap. And I think in Nevada, it's like 3.65%. So you can only charge as a city or county up to $3.65 per $100 of total assessed value in terms of property tax collection. And every time I overlay a new GID, I'm inching myself closer and closer to that $3.65 per $100 of total assessed value that I have to work under in terms of the state constitutionally mandated property tax cap. So again, there's some benefits and wiggle room for overlapping GIDs, but again, you still have that property tax cap within the state constitution to deal with. But again, that said, this is a fairly expansive use or ability of general improvement districts to finance a variety of public infrastructure, public services, and public facility projects and programs, again, needed to support new private development and the services that property owners require. It is important to keep in mind that the general improvement district, again, is considered and treated by state law as an ad valorem property tax revenue. And that's why in NRS chapter 318, section 225, the local governing authority, and again, that's usually a city council or county commission, although they can designate a other group to essentially oversee and administer the general improvement district, the ability to levy a tax. And in this case, an ad valorem property tax is most commonly used. Although this section does kind of indicate that you can use other types of taxes, but it's pretty limited, at least in terms of practice, to an ad valorem property tax, an additional rate in addition to the base rate that's charged. Again, the other means that is identified within state law in terms of NRS chapter 318 allows the general improvement district, the city council or the county commission or its designate. An example of a designate is like the Incline Village General Improvement District. They have an elected board, and the Washoe County Board of County Commissioners, when IVGID, the Incline Village General Improvement District, was established, they designated IVGID and the IVGID board as their designate to do all these things. But you can certainly acquire and sell property, you can set rates, you can even charge tolls and other fees in order to support the general improvement district. And IVGID, the Incline Village General Improvement District, does that. They manage a golf course and they charge fees, right? Greens fees and rental fees and, fees for other services to use that golf course that IVGID, the Incline Village General Improvement District, collects and then utilizes to support the GID moving forward in addition to that base rate. So there's a little bit of wiggle room, but honestly, the charging of a property tax rate is really what gives the general improvement district its oomph in terms of being able to generate sufficient revenue to support the cost of administering and supporting new infrastructure, new services, and new facilities. So that's general improvement districts in a nutshell. Again, there's plenty of weeds to get lost into, but hopefully this has provided you with a general understanding of how the general improvement district under Nevada Revised Statute Chapter 318 works. Thank you.
Fred, this is Tom Harris. I got one question. I saw that those 21 things. I wish they had one thing. I don't know. Can a GID be used to help fund internet services to rural areas?
So going really quickly back to it, you can use the general improvement district for things like furnishing facilities for television, for FM radio, and for other related infrastructure. So I think it's fair that you could make the argument that other, would focus on things like broadband telecommunication infrastructure. Although, again, there is other statutes that are specific to that. There's like television districts.
Yeah.
There are maybe some more specialized tools within state law that would focus specifically on broadband and telecommunication technology. But I do know that there are some general improvement districts out there that have been used to finance, the other, right, which is broadband and telecommunication infrastructure. And given the popularity of GIDs in rural non-metro areas where broadband telecommunication infrastructure is a real concern and a real struggle, you're starting to see its utilization in that area. In the metro areas, not so much. But for the rurals, yeah, I think you could definitely make an argument to use general improvement districts to finance the development of infrastructure to support improved broadband, internet, and basic telecommunication service.
Again, as we come, an idea of this is, again, we come up with economic development strategies. But as we come out of COVID-19, and there's other fundings going on, and there's federal programs. There may be some things that Fred's talking about that might help initiate programs to help communities take full advantage of coming out of COVID-19. That's really why we want to do this. And I would say, ask Fred one time, if you have any questions, Fred, how can they send you an email?
My email address is probably one of the easiest email addresses at UNR to remember. It's just my first name, Fred, F-R-E-D, at unr.edu. So Fred, F-R-E-D, at unr.edu. Pretty straightforward. And you can always get my contact information through the College of Business website. Just Google UNR College of Business, Fred Steinmann, and that'll take you directly to my faculty page as well.
And also your leadership phase.
The Nevada Leadership Program, part of the University Center for Economic.
Well, I appreciate your time. This is very interesting. Bob, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Fred. The only question I have is why aren't we seeing more GIDs in general?
Well, again, I think it's twofold. One is certainly the existence of the property tax cap that is mandated in the state constitution at $3.65 per $100 of AV. And because the general improvement district is specifically treated in state law as an ad valorem property tax rate, it's subject to that property tax cap. And in most of our major populated areas, Washoe, Carson City, Clark, and I think even Elko County is creeping up on it, and maybe even Lyon County, they are at or very, very close to that $3.65 or 3.65% property tax cap. So there isn't a lot of flexibility to use the GID in that regard. I also think, the second reason being there's probably some unfamiliarity and, lack of experience in its utilization in certain counties. I mean, Douglas County has been using it forever and they use it very effectively and they're very familiar with it and they're happy to use it. In other counties, where there hasn't been that experience and past usage, I think there's a little gun shyness. And I think maybe as a third additional reason, the limitation that GIDs can only finance one thing at a time is another limited thing. Like if I look at, say, special assessment districts under NRS Chapter 271, SAD is not limited by that. I can fund whatever I want to do under 271, and I can fund multiple things at once in one single fiscal year. Because again, the SAD, the 271 special assessment district, is not a property tax. It is a fee, it's an assessment. So it's not subject to the cap in the state constitution or prevailing sales tax rates. So I can charge property owners and parcel owners and whatever I want in the SAD to fund whatever I want. The GID is not that. It can only fund one thing at a time, given revisions to Chapter 318 of the last several sessions. In the past, like I said in the example of the Incline Village General Improvement District, GIDs could fund more than one thing at a time. But subsequent legislative restrictions on that have kind of made the GID less attractive. And then again, like I said, you have the property tax cap and the lack of familiarity with its utilization in some communities. And that all kind of makes GIDs not as popular, if you will, compared to SADs and 271 or other financing tools that exist in state law.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob and Fred. It's very, very interesting. It's very complex, but understanding this and then getting into the weeds, if you want to try it, these are instruments to help you develop an economic development program that you may have on your books and wonder, how can I get it going?
Yep.
The next one is what, Fred? The third phase. The third.
Well, we're going to be talking, I believe, about tourism improvement districts, tax increment areas, and redevelopment districts over the coming days as part of this series of 5. Really quick, Tom, I just want to say your final comment about the importance of financing community and economic development. In a past life, before I came to the university and decided the academic route was my job, I worked for the Reno Redevelopment Agency at the city of Reno. It was really kind of my first, true job post-college, right? Like, oh, wow, I'm a professional now, yay. And my boss at the redevelopment agency was Peter Gillen. He was the redevelopment administrator. And he told me very early on in my tenure there, and it's a rule that I live by to this day, the ability to write a check is everything. And we can come up with fancy plans and elaborate documents and visioning charrettes about what we want to do in terms of community and economic development. But, and this is an important thing for the viewers of this podcast and the public in general to understand. Just because government provides the service, the facility, or the infrastructure doesn't make it free. They have to pay for it just like we have to pay for it. And if you're a city and county, even a state government, you don't have the ability to just run deficits and print money. You have to balance your budget. And sometimes your revenues don't equal the demand for services and infrastructure. So you have to pay for it some way. And because the ability to write a check is everything in this business, things like general improvement districts and other financing tools have become part of the way in which local cities and counties finance community and economic development in Nevada. Again, the ability to write a check, everything.
Show me the money. Okay. All righty. Well, thank you very much. And we look forward for the very informative podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.